guys! Today we'll be recapping the manhwa, How Did I Become the Princess? Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, as it really helps our channel grow. Thanks. In a faraway land, the people of a mythical empire were plagued by demons for centuries. Until one day, a female warrior defeated the Demon King and ushered in an era of peace. Many nations bestowed her with treasure to express their gratitude, while the empire made her a noble and erected a statue in her honor. But the warrior did not live the rest of her life in luxury and peace as she deserved. She was poisoned by a noble of the Mara Heart Empire who didn't want her to join a neighboring country and fight for them instead. He even threatened to cut off her arms. Since the war was over, she had no reason to use her sword anymore, right? Wrong. She used it again that very day to slaughter the nobleman and every one of his guards. Exhausted and near death, the warrior sought the help of a dragon named Weinberg, who agreed to grant her a wish once she completed her mission of saving the world from the demons. She asked to go back in time to before she was a warrior, when she was just an innocent little girl. The dragon accepted, and she was sent back in time. Only nothing was how she remembered it. She ended up in the palace being escorted to meet the emperor. Both the Emperor Alexei von Marahart Ovyulia and the Prime Minister Dominic von Alberon are waiting for her inside. The warrior, now just a young girl, has no idea why she's here until Alexei stands from his seat declaring that she is the princess he lost 12 years ago. Wait, what? Just because they look kind of similar? Is that even possible? The servants bring forward a crystal ball which will check her ether. Those who share the same blood have similar ethers, so if she touches the ball and a wintry pattern appears, they will know for sure that she is part of the Imperial Ovyulia family. Ether, by the way, is an intangible force that exists in the world. The Ovyulia family became the rulers of the empire because 1,000 years ago, their ancestor proved that he could use his special powers to manipulate ether, and thus founded an empire which still stands today. Hesitantly, the girl touches the crystal ball, and to her shock, it displays the same pattern as Alexei. At first, she thinks it's broken, but the Emperor, her new father, is convinced. He picks her up at once, remarking that she looks just like the Empress. It's all a little awkward for the little warrior, who is now being held by a man she just met and called a princess. The Emperor clears his schedule for the time being and asks for her name. Until now, she's never had one. As if that wasn't sad enough, she was also staying at a farmhouse where she was beaten and threatened. So she ran away and was found by a baron who brought her to the palace. She is then passed over to a group of adoring ladies who are delighted to finally meet her. They bathe and clothe her, analyzing her every feature and commenting on her weight, her height, her hair. It's a little overwhelming. When she sees her own reflection all dressed up in pink, she is even more flustered. A maid arrives to take her back to her father, the emperor. The staff have gone all out for her arrival and set up a giant spread of cakes and treats in the garden for their new princess. The emperor is happy to see her clean and, well, out of that rag she was wearing. He tells her that she did have a name when she lived with him, but he couldn't officially name her due to some mysterious circumstances. Although it's been 12 years, he'd still like to give her one and asks if it would be okay. The warrior-turned-princess has never had a name, even in the years that she fought for humanity and became a hero. The idea of having an identity, a name made just for her, is so exciting that she cracks the first smile since she arrived, and agrees. Her father said that while she was gone, he added another name for each year that they were apart. So technically, she's supposed to have 12 names. Even for a princess, that's a little extra, don't you think? The emperor eventually decided on 3 that he really loved. Nanael, Ibisela, Eurydice. Quite the mouthful. He couldn't have just gone with the classic Isabel or a good old Jane? No? Anyway, from now on, she'll be known as Nanael. That was the first name the empress picked when she was pregnant, hoping her baby would be a girl. Nanael loves her new name so much that she starts crying. The moment the first tear falls, the emperor dismisses the staff and shields her from view. He wipes her eyes and says he doesn't want to share his daughter's tears with anyone else. Ordinarily, he would have let her cry it out and have a rest, but they have a lot more planned for the day, so they hop in a carriage where her father tells Nanael about her older brothers. She has 2 of them, quite a bit older than she is, and she'll meet them tomorrow. They then arrive at their destination, Etiquette Palace, which is going to be her home from now on. A huge crowd of servants are waiting to greet them. His Majesty has been very selective in his hiring process. He's even handpicking the maids and tutors. Nanael has been assigned the largest chamber in the palace, which includes 15 different rooms. What's a 12-year-old going to do with all that space? The princess is thinking the same, a little overwhelmed by her father's attention and care. Seeing her discomfort, the Emperor offers to knock all the walls down and turn it into one big room. Right, like that would make it better. The princess quickly refuses and assures her father that she's perfectly content with this chamber. At least she won't get bored. It'll take her a week just to explore her own bedroom. The Emperor then tours her around the rest of the palace, and after a long day of introductions, tucks her into bed. He kisses her on the forehead, leaving the little girl to wonder how she ended up here. Her heart is still racing, so she steps outside for a breath of fresh air. To her shock, there's a visitor waiting for her on the balcony. It's Weinberg, the golden dragon. And he's a lot bigger than before. Didn't he fit inside a tree trunk in her past life? He walks toward her, getting smaller with every step. In her past life, when she was about this age, Nanael was near death when the dragon came and offered her a contract which could save her, so long as she completed her mission. As we know, she grew up to become the fabled warrior and save the world, so she did as she was told. She wonders if the dragon came back to give her another task and quickly gets frustrated. When he calls her child, she yells back that she has a name now. A whole bunch of them, actually. Weinberg is impressed that she's already found her relatives, but he reminds her that their contract was made with ether that intertwines their souls. Nothing can break the bond between them, not even death. In other words, Nanael will always be his contracted knight of the 4 seasons, in her past life and in this one. Although that does come with an advantage, since it means she can use her old powers and summon the sword of the 4 seasons. Weinberg has no more missions or tasks for her to complete, but he used most of his powers to send her back in time, so now he's stuck in this weak form for the next century. And who better to stay with for protection than his very own contracted knight? Obviously, having a little golden dragon following her around would probably raise some questions, so Weinberg transforms into a cute little cat instead. The next morning, the head butler and head maid, Lucius and Mila, introduce themselves to the princess. Since they still don't have a maid or tutor just yet, they suggest she take a walk through the gardens. She takes Weinberg with her, communicating via ether so that the maid can't hear them talking. They're interrupted by the arrival of a carriage, carrying the 2 brothers she's heard literally nothing about. She can tell by their auras that both the boys have the talent to weld ether, which is incredibly rare. It's always the firstborn alone in the imperial family who is able to manipulate the force. That firstborn child, therefore, becomes the heir and is trained to rule one day. There's been no exception for the last 1,000 years. Until now, of course. The 2 princes, Aiden and Sergi, are actually twins, so the power to use ether is split between them. Apart from their faces, however, they're total opposites. Aiden is kind and friendly toward his baby sister, while Sergi is a little more rough around the edges. There's only a 5-year difference between them, but it feels a lot bigger than that. Especially when Sergi is acting like a jerk, ordering his little sis around and demanding she come sit next to him. Weinberg doesn't respond well to his attitude, but in his current form as a kitten, there's not a whole lot that he can do about it. Luckily, Nanael has enough spunk for them both and tells Sergi she doesn't want to. She argues back that unless he is a grandpa and can't see well, there's no reason for her to get any closer. Sergi loses his temper. He says she must not want to sit next to him because then he'll see how ugly she is. Is this guy her big brother or her bully? Seriously, what a douche. He starts toying with her hair, at which point Aiden steps in and knocks him back. But he keeps going, even grabbing her wrists and making fun of how thin she is. That's when Aiden really gets mad. He shoves his twin back and takes Nanael in his arms and tells Sergi firmly to control himself. I guess he can be pretty scary because the older brother backs off after that. He gives her a pretty pathetic excuse for an apology, but things are still kind of icy between them until he leaves. Sergi, however, doesn't seem bothered by his sister's dislike. He actually finds it funny. I mean, she basically kicked the heir to the imperial throne out of her palace, and she only got here yesterday. That night, the princess has trouble sleeping. She can't help but replay the memory from her past life, the only time she met the Emperor. Back then, she was the warrior, and she had no idea that he was really her father. It's a shame he didn't recognize her back then the way he did in this life, but she did look very different in those days. Scars covered her face and body, distorted by the poison of monsters she defeated in battle. She wonders if he still would have accepted her, even with her scarring. Weinberg reassures her that he doesn't seem like the kind of father to toss away a child just because of their appearance. Then he gets mad, asking if she's thinking this because of what Sergi said earlier about her being ugly. He even offers to take a bite out of him for her. Of course, just because Nanael looks young doesn't mean she's so easily bruised. Then, almost like he knew she couldn't sleep, her father walks in. Maybe he did know, using his ether senses. He spent the whole day selecting her personal staff, so starting tomorrow, she's going to be pretty busy. The person he had in mind for her tutor wasn't available, so he's hired a temporary replacement until she can step in. Who is this mysterious madam that the Emperor favors so highly? Well, we won't find out for a while yet. The temporary tutor is Miss Viola Mary, a former Marquise's wife. She's a little harsh and has lots to say about Nanael's speech and manners. Has everyone forgotten that she literally lived on the streets for 12 years? Of course she doesn't act like a princess. Cut her some slack. Weinberg takes an instant disliking to her for the same reason. Nanael thinks he's being sensitive, but she knows better than to take his opinion for granted. After Viola has disappeared, the butler announces that the first prince has come to visit his sister. After what he said to her last time, the princess is in no mood to entertain, so she tells the butler to inform him that her schedule is full today, which is basically the royal way of saying get lost. The first class with Viola is soon underway. The first task of the day is to fix her posture, so the tutor places a book on her head and asks her to walk without dropping it. Then they fix her sitting position, which apparently requires literally strapping her to a chair. It's incredibly uncomfortable and impossible to maintain. Nanael finally agrees with Weinberg that Miss Viola isn't a good match, but she bears the pain through the lesson, hoping that her intentions are kinder than her attitude. When their teaching is finally done, Nanael is shocked to find her brothers waiting outside her chamber. They've been there since the morning! Exhausted from her etiquette lesson, the princess decides to ignore them, just for one more day. Besides, she's still got one more introduction to do, because her father has finally found her a lady-in-waiting, a young girl named Regina Hayes. Regina comforts her about the difficulty of etiquette lessons and tucks her up into bed with a nice warm cup of milk. But just as she's about to go to sleep, there's a knock on the door. It's mean Miss Viola, but why is she here at this hour? Actually, she's come to apologize for her harsh manner. Well, it's about time. Viola admits that she was a close friend of the late Empress, Nanael's mother. After her husband passed away and then her friend, she became lonely and perhaps a little cruel. From now on, she promises to think of the princess as her real daughter and gives her a kiss goodnight before leaving her be. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm still getting super bad vibes from that lady, and so is Weinberg, and that's how you know something's up. Also, her brothers are still waiting outside. Night has long fallen and Sergi won't give up, though he's clearly made himself comfortable. And poor Aiden has been dragged along to explain what he did wrong in the first place. How is this guy in line for the throne? Meanwhile, Weinberg has taken a little trip to visit one of his other prodigies, Lich, who seems pretty gruesome. Remind me why he chose a 12-year-old to protect him? This guy seems pretty capable. Actually, it kind of seems like Lich is the one that sent him to Nanael. He clearly intends to visit her soon, but some kind of revenge mission is keeping him occupied. Back at the palace, morning has arrived, which means it's back to etiquette lessons for the princess. I don't know if he stayed the night or what, but Sergi is still outside. He was definitely there until at least dawn. Miss Viola is still being sly, but Nanael is resolved to give her a proper chance before asking her father to get her a new tutor. But something is definitely up. When she drops the book, she bends down to pick it up and Regina rushes over to take it for her, asking the princess to leave lowly tasks to her maid. It really seems like they're hiding something. Does Regina know something we don't? After etiquette lessons, the butler announces that Sergi is still outside and desperate to see her. He's done his time now, so Nanael agrees to meet him. The butler opens the door halfway, letting the princess hear how urgently her brother has been pleading to meet her. When she appears, he stumbles back in shock and starts rambling a crazy apology that seems more nervous than genuine. But he does say he won't bully her anymore, so Nanael invites him inside for some food. She's not particularly impressed with his behavior, and her mood worsens even further when Viola uses their dinner as an opportunity to continue her teaching. She goes on and on about the way she holds her fork, using backhanded compliments to make her feel small and constantly correcting her position. But Sergi's not the type to sit by and watch. He throws his plate like a child having a tantrum and tells her to postpone the class. And when she refuses, he gets up and walks right over to her, blatantly admitting that her teaching style is problematic. He points out that if his father were here instead of him, she would never have dared to say the things she's been telling his little sister, and he takes that as a personal insult, an assumption that he would let her cruelty slide. Uh-oh, she's really done it now. Viola's dignity crumbles in front of the first prince. She bows immediately, begging for forgiveness, and scurries away at once. He might be crass, but Sergi sure is good at the protective big brother role. There's no way he would have let his baby sis be bullied like that. He adjusts her position to make her more comfortable and shows her how to eat more practically. Nanael cuts off his impromptu dining lesson and reminds him of the real reason he came here, to give her an apology. At once, Sergi gets on his knees and gives her a proper apology. He even offers to swear on oath if she wants it. Since he's kind of cute and clearly very earnest, Nanael decides to forgive him, but she won't forget. Not while they still don't know each other that well. And she warns him that if she decides that he was intentionally being mean when they first met, she won't ever look at or talk to him again. That's it, girl. Really make him work for it. Her afternoon classes are canceled that day. Apparently, after her run-in with Sergi, Viola has fallen ill. Regina even saw her crying. Did he really scare her that much? Nanael is struggling to uncover her tutor's motive. If she was just trying to get closer to the imperial family, wouldn't she have been more careful? The princess decides to investigate further and goes to apologize to her tutor in person for what happened at lunch. Viola is really laying it on thick. She won't even get out of bed. Nanael asks her about a term she heard Sergi use during their argument, half-freak. Viola, who is clearly glad she asked, explains that the twins are sometimes cruelly referred to as half-freaks because of their ether being split. It's not actually been proven that way because they can't use their full powers, but lots of people, including Viola it seems, believe that their eyes are proof enough. This is like the last piece of the puzzle for Nanael, who now knows Viola's true intentions. She wants to replace her mother. By eliminating the half-powerful twins and becoming close to this promising young princess, she wanted to marry the emperor and end up at the top of the entire empire. Talk about delusion, as if that was ever going to happen. And if that wasn't bad enough, it seems someone has been putting something in her milk. Unsurprisingly, Miss Viola is also ill again the next day, which means all Nanael's classes are canceled. But that doesn't mean she's free to play the day away. The sudden arrival of a carriage brings with it the man in charge of the palace, Count Rondinel. He was ordered by the emperor to visit the princess and has brought a mysterious object covered with a large cloth. On the emperor's orders, he cannot reveal the contents in public, so for now, it will remain a secret. But he also brought a large golden key, which he hands over to the princess. With no explanation as to what it's for, it's kind of useless at the moment. Her father has also sent about 1,000 dresses to try on, so really, it's a good thing Viola pretended to be sick. A surprise visit from Alexei and Aiden cheers her up and gives her a break from all the maids and dress fittings. To her surprise, Sergi is absent. He received an urgent mission this morning, so he'll be gone for a while. But he asked Aiden to visit and play with her every day while he's away. Aiden also assures her that he's not in any danger, so there's no need to worry. When she asks her father about the key given to her by the Count, he asks Aiden to leave the room. He says it's a special gift made just for her, so only the owner can see it. Nanael's curiosity is now piqued. He takes her to the door. When she puts in her key and turns it, she enters a room with a mysterious covered object. Finally, she is allowed to pull off the cover, revealing a beautiful miniature version of Arquetta Palace. It's meant to be a dollhouse, but it's bigger than the princess herself. You could probably fit 3 of her in that thing. Although, it's not just a toy. The palace contains 2 secret passageways, and the dollhouse includes them, so she can learn her way around the palace while she plays. There are also hidden gifts in different parts of the dollhouse, including a little brooch that once belonged to her mother. The emperor then asks about Viola and how their lessons have been going. It would be so easy to tell him the truth right now and get Viola kicked out of the palace. But since she's a noble, there would be lots of questions, and Nanael doesn't want to get her father in any trouble with the aristocracy. So she decides to keep going with Viola for now, at least until her permanent teacher, the Duke of Vixen, arrives. Even when Aiden is leaving, she is hesitant to admit that Viola has been a bad teacher, like her brother suspects. Nanael has a bigger plan in mind anyway. From her past life, she has plenty of experience gathering information, which is what she'll need if she wants to beat her tutor. Before she became the warrior, she took on lots of dangerous jobs and was often taken advantage of because she couldn't read the contracts she accepted. That was when she met a certain someone with green eyes and dark hair. Someone we've seen once before. After Weinberg taught her the basics of reading, she took on a job in the woods, following a torn piece of parchment with the details of her latest quest. The boy, who she saved from a burning mansion, continued to follow her silently through the woods and ended up becoming a companion of sorts. But Nanael didn't want the responsibility, so she wanted to get rid of him. Just as she was hoping to shake him, the boy proved himself useful by helping her read her quest. Thanks to him, they made it to the injured villagers before anything worse could happen, and the boy asked to stay by her side from then on. I don't know why he wants permission now, considering he never asked before, but in exchange, he offered to teach her how to read and write. Back in the present, the princess is thankful that he did, but Weinberg tells her that Lich, his other protege who looks suspiciously like her old companion, revealed that in his timeline, he read that the twin sons of Emperor Alexei were murdered by some scheming nobles. Wait, what? So Lich was her companion in her past life but is also alive in the future? And why is Weinberg telling her that her brothers are in danger? She's only 12. But it does explain some things. Nanael didn't know the princess had brothers when she first arrived, because they died before Lich was born, when she was still training her powers. Great, so now she has to find a sneaky way to get rid of Viola and to save her brothers? As if that wasn't enough, she returns to her chamber to find Regina waiting with her usual cup of milk. It's getting sweeter, which means she's definitely still adding something, but whether it's cinnamon or poison, she still can't tell. If you ask me, she shouldn't be drinking it. Actually, if you ask me, she should have fired all the suspicious people a long time ago. Anyway, Regina also dropped a piece of ribbon and makes the excuse that the maids must have left it behind. Toying with her, Nanael tells her to keep it as a gift, making her feel guilty for lying so obviously. She gives her even more gifts, really rubbing it in. Then she decides to gift her mother's old brooch to Viola. What is she doing? A few days later, Viola finally emerges from her bedroom and comes looking for the princess to restart their etiquette lessons. But as the headmaid informs her, Nanael left the palace early that morning and will only return in the afternoon. The maid is very sneaky, reassuring Viola that she should take as much rest as possible since she was too ill to perform her duties and has only just recovered. It's very sly, but the tutor knows she's being insulted. She gestures subtly to the brooch from the late empress, explaining that the princess treats her very well because she thinks of Viola as a mother. Seriously? How deluded can you be? The headmaid is clearly very displeased to see her wearing it and even implies that she might have stolen it. Insulted, Viola storms back upstairs. Meanwhile, Nanael and Aiden are having lunch at the main palace as an excuse to avoid her lessons. I mean, technically she still is studying. As Aiden points out, she is using appropriate table manners after all. He assures her that she's doing well. So long as she gives Viola no sign of suspicion, everything will go according to plan. She bids Aiden goodbye, asking him to come back to the Arquetta Palace with her father whenever she gives him a sign. The second she's back inside, Viola is right over her shoulder, saying how disappointed she is that the princess has been skipping her morning classes. For once, Nanael lets her mask slip and argues back, but she smooths it over by telling Viola that if she's ever impolite, it's only because her tutor feels so much like her mother that she forgets to be respectful. Right. She offers to retake her morning classes now. Regina is about to get a book for her posture lessons, but Nanael wants to use the one she got from her brother. For some reason, that makes Regina start to sweat. Viola offers her an excuse, claiming that book is too heavy and might hurt her head. How stupid do they think she is? They've basically just proven that the book has been tampered with. Are they working together to ruin her royal training? After taking a good look at the book and proving her suspicions, Nanael declares that she has a headache and the lesson is over. As usual, Viola makes her feel bad about it, but ends up agreeing. Back in her bedroom, Nanael tells Weinberg that she has sent the sign to Aiden. Finally, she's decided to strike back at the two villains in her palace. One way or another, Regina and Viola will face the consequences of their actions. The Emperor soon comes striding into the palace with his son in tow. Once he heard that his daughter had a headache, he came at once. But it seems like they both came because they genuinely thought she was ill, so that signal didn't work the way she was expecting. Her father makes a comment about the maid and tutor not knowing she was ill until it was too late, which makes Regina nervous. Viola is composed as always, which only makes Nanael more determined to push back. She tells her father that she's working so hard on etiquette classes and asks him to take a look at her posture when she walks. At this point, Regina is shaking. She tries to bring a different book, but the princess demands the usual one, so that her father can see it's been tampered with. Reluctantly, Regina brings the book and tries to place it on her head. Aiden notices her shaking hands and tells the tutor to do it instead. Viola doesn't flinch. She places the book on her head and watches as she drops it over and over again. Nanael continues to act innocent, but after a while, Aiden is suspicious. He saw her do it perfectly earlier that day, though that was a different book, of course. He insinuates that the book might be the problem, so Nanael asks to try again with a different one. Her father and brother watch closely as Viola places the book atop her head. The princess walks steadily and gives them a perfect curtsy. The Emperor inspects the book, and his face turns dark. He throws the book at the girls, narrowly missing Regina, who screams. He accuses her at first, but even the Emperor knows a maid couldn't have done something like this on her own. That's when Viola drops to her knees and tells him she's been framed. But any chance she had at redemption is over when he spots his late wife's brooch on her dress. He rips it off, ignoring Viola's desperate pleas that it was a gift. He asks his daughter for the truth, and she makes it seem like the brooch went missing earlier this week. Oh, she's sneaky. I like her style. Obviously, the Emperor believes his daughter, even when Regina swears the tutor is telling the truth. The maid confirms that Nanael reported the brooch missing about 1 week ago, exactly when Viola claims she was given it. The princess plays an impressive innocent act and tries to convince her father that it's her fault for not telling him about the brooch sooner. He assures her that no member of the imperial family is ever in the wrong. The fault is with the criminals behind them. Yikes! I guess he won't be showing them any mercy. The Emperor turns to his son for their punishment, and sweet little Aiden suggests cutting off their hands, and says it with a smile too. In the end, Regina blamed Viola for everything. She was expelled from the palace, and Viola had her title removed, forcing her to live a life worse than a commoner's. The next morning, Nanael is enjoying her new free time when Sergi storms into her room. He was away for almost a month in the end, but he heard all about the situation with Viola and Regina. He starts blabbing about his mission with the Duke, but the princess cuts him off when she feels her father's ether enter the palace. They run downstairs to find her father, who is accompanied by yet another familiar-looking stranger. Does Lich have a sister? This is Duchess Vixen, the tutor that the Emperor wanted in the first place, and the only person he trusts with his daughter's studies. The Duchess introduces herself as Stella Lizzie Elene von Vixen, catching the attention of even Weinberg. Despite having only just seen her, Weinberg seems to think she's trustworthy, at least more than that nasty lady Viola. And she certainly has her priorities straight. She's more interested in teaching Nanael how to read than how to carry books atop her head. Her new studies will consist of poetry, history, writing, and dance in the afternoons, though Stella makes a point to tell the princess she doesn't have to study anything she dislikes. As it turns out, the Duchess used to be the Emperor's guard until she was Sergi's swordsmanship teacher for a while. Her real skills are with swords, not books. As such, the adults offer her the chance to replace dance with swordsmanship lessons. Little do they know that this was once the most famous warrior in the Empire. She's had enough fighting for a lifetime, literally. Instead, she picks horseback riding. Just then, Regina enters the room to deliver a cup of tea, shocking the Emperor, who ordered her to leave the palace. Nanael, however, asked her to stay. She wanted a lovely cup of milk one last time, which is obviously just a way of ensuring Regina finally gets outed for slipping something in her drink. Stella, who just so happens to have a poison tester on her, senses something strange in the tea and searches through Regina's belongings. She returns with a vial of liquid, and when she pours it on the tester, it turns black. Oh, she's really done it now. Regina pretends she's never seen the vial before, so the Emperor sends for one of his guards to help clear things up. He orders her to be locked up and tortured until they can get the truth out of her. She is dragged away, kicking and screaming, making some crazy claims about her being a princess of the imperial family too. Okay, sweetie, keep dreaming. Nanael also noticed that she didn't have any of the presents she gave in her possession, which means she was probably selling them outside the palace. Because it would have been hard for a mere maid to smuggle in poison and smuggle out expensive gifts, that makes it even more likely that she was working with Viola. Luckily, the ether in the princess's body detoxifies poisons, which is why she wasn't scared to keep drinking the milk. But it still doesn't make sense. What would Regina have to gain from the princess's death? What was her real motive? The Emperor promises to investigate further and orders a troop of knights to surround the Arcata Palace, moving his daughter to the main palace for the time being. Later, the Emperor is given a full report of Regina's torture. She confessed to poisoning the milk, but the poison would only have decreased her immunity and didn't pose any great threat to her life. Honestly, that's even more strange. Anyway, Nanael gets to sleep beside her father while she's staying at his palace, so I'd say her plan worked out pretty well. The next morning, Nanael is invited to have breakfast with her father from now on. It might not seem like a big deal, but her brother said that joining the Emperor for breakfast is like being officially introduced as a member of the royal family. Duchess Vixen can tell that she's nervous and reminds Nanael that she's the princess of a great empire. She can make as many mistakes as she wants. It turns out breakfast with the Emperor is quite the affair. Pretty much every state official is present and watching closely for any slip-up from their new princess. The Emperor formally introduces her to the officials, who bow and greet her as a true royal. Nanael plays her part perfectly, but when the food arrives, no one touches it. They just keep staring at her. The Emperor warns them to stop making her uncomfortable, but it's just because she looks so much like the Emperor. The princes, on the other hand, are being talked about by everyone. The princess can hear people critiquing their behavior and calling them half-eat princes because of their eyes, so she purposefully breaks a glass, drawing the attention back to herself and giving Sergi a warning look. The conversation then moves on to Nanael's unfortunate incident with her tutor and maid. They put a lot of pressure on the Emperor to prioritize her safety, so he announces that he plans to appoint 2 guardian knights to the princess. It's a bit excessive, even for a princess. She tries to convince her father that just 1 is fine, and after a very long conversation, he agrees. They then discuss the princess's upcoming birthday. The Emperor's already planning a huge feast in which he plans to bestow the official title of princess to her. Because she's been on her own for so long, Nanael didn't even know she had a birthday. As soon as she's back with Weinberg, he announces that Lich has completed his mission. It's only been 2 years since he was tasked with the capture of the Demon King, so that's pretty fast. Weinberg and Nanael travel together to his secret lair, where Lich comes to greet them. It's strange for Nanael to see him fully grown, while she looks like a child. Even so, he kneels and kisses her hand. The princess is a little taken aback and gets even more embarrassed when he makes a big deal of reintroducing himself formally. He has suffered a lot because of her. By turning back time, she has placed them both in a world 8 years before he was born. His family, his name, his status, everything is lost. But Lich doesn't mind. In fact, he chose to stay behind so that he could see her again in this world. Lich asks for her name since he never heard it in her past life. She gives it to him and he asks for permission to use it with the most charming smile she's ever seen. I know he's one of the good guys, but is anyone else starting to think Lich is a bit of a creep? She thanks him for passing on the information she needed to get rid of Viola. It turns out it was her who conspired to kill them in the past, so by getting her out of the palace, she has also saved their lives. As thanks, she offers him a huge pile of gems and jewels from the palace. He takes them and overhears them talking about Nanael's birthday. Of course, he wants to prepare a present of his own, because clearly, he's obsessed with her. Weinberg, on the other hand, has an entire cave of wonders for her to choose from. He tells her to pick anything she wants, and she ends up choosing a beautiful box filled with cookies? They might not be very fancy, but they do look delicious. A week later, Nanael has been appointed a new maid, named Lena Maria Alice, who already seems better than Regina. Not like it's hard. Her lessons with Duchess Vixen have also started. So far, she is learning about the continent's culture and economy, with an emphasis on the role of mercenary guilds in the Empire. Nanael herself was part of one in her past life and got such a high score on her mercenary rating that they had to make a new category just for her. While she was away with Weinberg, the Emperor had a music room prepared for her lessons, a tea party room, and even an exhibition hall. Talk about going overboard! In addition to all the rest, there's one final room that she is only allowed to see once. It's the room appointed for her guardian knight, once she has chosen one. Ideally, she would probably choose Lich, but when she turned back time, his noble heritage was swept away, so now he's a commoner. If he wants to become any kind of knight, he'll have to start from the bottom to prove himself. At least for the time being, she will have to choose a guard with the help of her father. And he's really gone all out. The selection of the guard will be held tomorrow so that she has a royal knight in time for her birthday banquet. Since it will be her formal introduction to the nobles of society, she needs to have one for the sake of their family reputation. So the next morning after breakfast, Nanael joins her father in visiting the drill hall. The boys tag along too, as does Duchess Vixen, so that she can help identify good and bad technique. The night drill hall is actually a lot fancier than you might expect. It could easily be confused for a room in the Arquetta Palace. There's even a luxurious box for the royal family to watch the proceedings from. This is basically like a concert for them. All this luxury is for the North Node Knights, who belong to the imperial family of Ovyulia. Both the North and South Node Knights are highly regarded, but those in the North Node building are considered elite. They're under the immediate control of the imperial family, which is why a royal knight is usually selected from among them. There are also lots of benefits given to those who are loyal for a long time, so the competition to become Nanael's personal guard will be fierce. With a nod from the Emperor, the ceremony begins. The Alpha Knights appear first, in white uniforms that prove their status as the Royal Emperor's bodyguards. Next are the Castor Knights for Sergi in dark blue, and Poulot Knights for Aiden in red, and a group of guards in gray who are going to be assigned to the princess. As part of the ceremony, Nanael is given a sword and asked to make a pledge to the gathered knights. This is where she really shines. All the guards can see the remnants of the Knight of the Four Seasons in her power and confidence when she speaks. She summons the Grey Guards, who introduce themselves one by one and pledge their lives to the princess. In return, she raises her sword and names them Entares, her own personal sect of knights. Now that the starting ceremony is completed, the real competition can begin. The Duchess Vixen is surprised that a 12-year-old girl can lift a sword so comfortably, almost like she's done it before. The Duchess explains that the position of personal knight will go to the winner of the competition, who will then swear a unique oath directly to the princess. Apparently, the ranking battles held between the North and South Node Knights had a particularly skilled young knight who won first place. He was originally a South Node Knight who had only recently joined the force. It came as a big surprise that he won, not only because of how new he was, but because South Node Knights can't wield aura, the way some of the North Node Knights can. Those who use aura in battle are leagues ahead of those who can't, so it's extra impressive that a South Node Knight managed to beat even those skilled fighters. Duke Muayan, who is in charge of the North Node Knights, is actually the father of that special knight. He must be especially pleased that his son is competing here today. It turns out all the North Node Knights already had a preliminary round to determine a final 8 contestants. And right beneath them is that very knight, the son of Duke Muayan. He seems strangely familiar to Nanael, and she wonders if she met him in her past life. If they did, it doesn't seem like they had a good relationship. That's what her gut feeling says anyway. She makes a flyaway comment about how he's quite handsome, which stuns her brothers and father into silence. Oh well, there go his chances. Nanael quickly assures her father that she has no interest in the knight, while Aiden struggles to keep Sergi under control. Really, these guys. Even from up in the balcony, Nanael can see his ether is very special. He's using it to surround his sword at this very moment, something that only very talented knights are able to do. Sergi and Aiden are also impressed by the young knight, whose name is Ferdinand. But he's up against a member of the First Prince's personal squad, the Castor Knights. So this first fight is sure to be a good one. The battle starts right away. Ferdinand is ferocious right off the bat. Although the handling of his ether is still a little clumsy, his skills and intuition are unmatched. He defeats the senior knight in a matter of minutes and moves on to the next round. As the final round draws closer, Nanael starts to get excited. Once she has an escort knight, she'll be able to leave the palace and even learn horseback riding. But that raises another question in her mind. If royals are so heavily guarded and sheltered from the world, then how did she get lost in the first place? Especially since her father is so protective, it's a little strange. While she's pondering her own origin story, the boys are discussing their next bet. The next round is between Ferdinand and Sir Wendenel, an accomplished knight. Aiden asks Nanael for advice on who he should pick, but since the boys keep accusing her of liking the Duke's son, she deflects the question to the Duchess, who also picks Ferdinand. Of course, her father is also a talented swordsman with the ability to control and see ether. So she asks him as well, but he doesn't have an answer. It seems he's still hung up on how she lifted the sword during the opening ceremony. Oops, you really blew your cover on that one, Nanael. She explains that she already practiced lifting it earlier, but her father tells her not to strain herself in future. It seems like he wants her to say more, but the final round has just begun. While Ferdinand and Sir Wendenel are trading blows, he assures her that both men are more than capable of protecting the princess, so she should be happy with either one. Sir Wendenel's sword is cast to the ground, and with that, the winner is decided. Duke Muayan looks very proud to ask her to begin the oath. Nanael moves to the top of the stairs and invites Ferdinand to come before her and make his vow. As he walks, Ferdinand swears loyalty and respect to the Ovyulia family and accepts any mission thrown his way, promising never to accept defeat. With every step and word, Nanael gets a stronger and stronger sense of familiarity and suspicion. But her father told her not to worry, and he's always by far the most protective when it comes to her. So she lifts her sword and swears him to her side, asking for his name. As he raises his head, she gets a chill down her spine. How could she possibly have forgotten those eyes? There's no doubt about it. She's definitely met this man before. The next morning, the maids take extra care with Nanael's makeup and outfit, dolling her up like a true princess. But she can't relax knowing that Ferdinand is standing right outside the door. Sensing her discomfort, Weinberg asks what their connection was in her past life and why she feels so weird. Even Nanael isn't totally sure. He didn't really do anything to her, and they hardly ever spoke. Actually, the only reason she knows him is because she tried to become a knight before in her past life. As a commoner, it was nearly impossible to become a knight, so she entered the military tournament for commoners that Lich himself is currently hoping to win. The victor earns a higher status, and if they can endure the training stages, they will even be offered a noble title. Nanael did win the competition, but during the training stages, she was bullied mercilessly. At first, they only talked behind her back, but when she didn't react, it got worse. They filled her room with garbage and rotting food. Then they released rats and bugs on her bed and tore her clothes to shreds. One day, when she turned up to training, they approached her and ripped off her hood, revealing that she was actually a girl. Obviously, that made everything 10 times worse. Because aren't things always 10 times worse when you're a girl? The drill sergeant arrived just before they started beating her. He seemed unimpressed, but the bullies made the excuse that they were just teaching the commoner some proper manners. It was a pathetic excuse. Even a child could see through it. But the Marquis in charge of their training that day didn't care. He just told them to clean up and be ready in an hour. And that Marquis was none other than Ferdinand, though he had a different name at the time. Nanael was shocked. People always ignored her pitiful situation when she was a child, but this was different. They were training to become knights, true nobles who hold honor above all else. How could a Marquis just ignore their awful behavior? That day, Nanael decided she had no interest in becoming a knight. Not a royal one, anyway. Back in the present, however, it puts her in a difficult situation. This is years before that incident took place, so maybe Ferdinand isn't yet that kind of person, but it's difficult not to keep hold of her judgments, especially when it's such a pivotal moment in her past. The man of the hour enters the room, bearing a gift from Sergi. Nanael forgot to tell him what she wanted for her birthday, so I guess he went out on his own and bought something. I hope it's not anything crazy. The gift is, in fact, a little bit crazy. Sergi has bought her a wig. The hair color is exactly like Nanael's, blonde fading into pink, but it's longer, like real princess hair. It must have been custom made, but is her short hair really so bad? I think it's cute. Nanael gives the wig a test drive when her birthday banquet arrives. Before it starts, Aiden and his little sister are chatting in a waiting room, where he thanks her for returning to their family and tells her how happy she has made them. He also thinks the long hair looks great, but Nanael isn't so sure. He apologizes, claiming that if he knew what Sergi was planning, he would have stopped him. He seems to think that she kept her hair short as a choice, when the truth is that the farmers cut it every month against her will. Before she can explain that to him, Sergi appears and comments on how cute the hair looks on their baby sister. Sergi is also training Ferdinand as her escort knight at the moment. The two boys have been friends since they were young, as the Duke Moyen helped establish the Empire and has been in charge of the North Node Knights for generations. So their family are very close to the Imperial family. It's common for the Moyens to become royal knights and then resign the post when it's time for them to lead the Node Knights. On average, they stay as escort knights for about 3 years before taking up the role. Although it would be a hassle to pick another knight, at least that means Nanael doesn't need to worry about him becoming that cold and cruel Marquis from her past life. Just then, Ferdinand interrupts their conversation to hint that he intends to remain the princess's escort for quite some time. It seems he likes the position more than he expected. Is that because he wants to protect her, or because he has an ulterior motive? When the Emperor arrives, they toast to the princess's health and long life, commencing the festivities with a kind of outdoor picnic spread all across the grounds. Her father planned it especially so that she could relax after all the craziness of her first few weeks. Then it's time for the first activity, where everyone at the party presents gifts to the princess to try and win her affection. There are countless gemstones, paintings, and even a pair of rare ivory tusks. The ivory is supposedly from Altion elephants, the largest and rarest species in the world. But the tusks don't look very long comparatively. Nanael asks the Baron who gave the gift if these tusks came from a female, and he says she's correct. To the nobles, it looks like the princess is just very clever, but actually, in her past life, Nanael was ordered to steal the exact same pair of tusks, not knowing it was a family heirloom of the Baron's household. She knows how much this means to their family, so to give it up to the princess is an incredible act of generosity. The Emperor decides to reward the Baron with a huge territory and a new title of Count as thanks. It really pays to spoil the princess in this country. Aiden is one of the last to give his gifts, a purebred Ceres Luna horse, which is perfectly white. Nanael absolutely loves it, especially since she'll be learning to ride horseback soon. Finally, her father gives her a tiara that can only be worn by royal descendants, as well as an entire parade of presents for her to choose from. It seems like he's trying to make up for all the birthdays they missed out on together, but that does make me wonder, how did she get separated in the first place? We still haven't heard the story. When Nanael is enjoying her celebrations, Weinberg takes a trip to visit his other adopted child, Lich. He's been preparing long and hard for the Harvest Tournament so that he could become an official knight, but it ended up being canceled. That sets his plans back by an entire year, but he's still determined to make it to her side. He doesn't seem to like the idea of someone else protecting the princess and asks Weinberg what kind of man is currently guarding her. He recognizes Ferdinand by name, though just like Nanael, he had a different surname in their past lives. Lich hates him for a very different reason, because he was constantly compared to the Marquise and told he would never live up to his talents. After hearing that the princess also had a bad feeling about him, Lich can't sit back and let things play out. Though he won't reveal what he plans to do, he asks Weinberg to hand his birthday gift over to Nanael. And speaking of the birthday girl, she is currently chatting with her father while the rest of the nobles dance the evening away. As always, her brothers can't keep away for long, especially Sergi, who has come to gloat about how pretty her new hair is. He was surprised to find a wig with such a similar color to her own hair, but Nanael explains that it probably is her actual hair. Since the farmhouse couple cut her hair off when she was young, it's likely that they sold it and that's how it ended up as a wig. Her family become very quiet after that. They still haven't heard the full story of how she's been treated after all these years. As a matter of fact, neither have we. Sergi, as usual, flies off the handle, infuriated and confused by her suggestion. Aiden calms him down and approaches Nanael. He hadn't intended to ask about her past in case it was too painful to talk about. The Emperor felt the same, but the princess assures them that she's happy to talk so they can ask whatever they like. So they ask for the full story about her hair, and she explains that the couple who took her in really took a liking to her hair. When it grew a certain length, they started to cut it, hoping to earn extra money by selling it to a wig business. She never thought much about it, but it's kind of poetic that it's ended up back on her head. Even after the party has finished, Aiden and Sergi look dismayed and clearly feel guilty that she had such a hard time while they were apart. The only person who doesn't seem bothered is Nanael herself. That night, Weinberg hands over the present from Lich, which turns out to be a bunch of beautiful pink flowers wrapped in a fancy green ribbon. It's simple but thoughtful, and Nanael really likes it. She even wraps the ribbon around her wrist that night. Little does she know, her father is cursing himself in his study. He thought the best way to help Nanael heal from her past was just to ignore it and let her adjust to her new, comfortable life as a princess. But now he realizes that's no better than denial. Determined to make things right with his daughter, he summons Dominic, his chancellor, at once. By the morning, Dominic has traced all transactions concerning the wig and discovered the farmhouse where Nanael spent the past few years. It was an illegal residential area which doesn't officially exist. No wonder her adopted parents were so shady. Dominic found out plenty about them as well. Nor and Odira Hiddle adopted Nanael from an orphanage when she was about 3 years old. They owned the largest plot of land in Bluewell, the residential area, and acted like they owned the place. They treated Nanael as a slave, giving her only one set of clothes and forcing her to work for her meals. The Emperor's face is set like stone. He orders for the Hiddle family to be brought to the palace at once, but Dominic reveals that they passed away just recently. About 10 days ago, a herd of magical creatures attacked the town and killed the entire family. Yikes! However, there are still some Bluewell residents alive who are suspected of deliberately hiding the princess's whereabouts and will thus be brought to the palace. I don't even want to know what the Emperor has planned for them. What he doesn't know is that the herd of magical animals were accompanied by Lich, who came to seek revenge on the family who treated the Knight of the Four Seasons so cruelly. He repaid their cruelty in spades, practically inviting the beasts into their home after revealing that the girl they mistreated was actually the princess of the Marahart Empire. Talk about adding insult to injury. Of course, the princess is unaware of all of this and continues to pass the time with her bodyguard. She soon starts riding lessons, accompanied by Ferdinand, who has now become the Marquis Scarlich that she remembers from her past life. He was gifted with a very noble title and lots of land. She's much more comfortable around him these days since they've spent a lot of time together. The Emperor has finally given her permission to explore all the grounds with the horse Aiden gave her, who has been named Chrissy. Just in case, the Duchess Vixen and Sir Scarlich will follow from a short distance behind. And it's a good thing they are. As soon as Nanael grabs the reins, Chrissy bolts into a flat-out sprint, going too fast to control. But it's also fun. She enjoys the freedom of flying across the grounds at top speeds until she comes across a group of guards protecting a squirrel and nearly runs them over. Luckily, she manages to leap over a guard and a river in one go, leaving the squirrel completely unharmed. Oh, and the people are fine too. The one protecting the squirrel was Dame Terrell. She's unhurt, but Nanael still feels guilty and wants to go apologize when Duchess Vixen suddenly praises her for the expert jump she pulled off. I mean, it was impressive, but shouldn't she really be told off? Apparently, the phrase "royals do no wrong" really is law around these parts. If anything, the Duchess thinks Dame Terrell should be the one told off for getting in the way. But she will still tell the Emperor, of course, so I guess the scolding will come later. On the way back, Nanael catches sight of Loazia Palace for the first time, the place where she was born. And that's it for today, guys. What did you think? As always, don't forget to like the video and comment for the next part so we know you want more. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for updates. See you in the next one!